Hello and welcome to the Brandon Ramacko podcast. I have with me today a Peter Teuscher. He's a seasoned life coach and the author of Rethinking Happiness. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's really great to speak to you today.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Actually, we chatted a little bit before starting this interview, and I felt like I could probably have gone on for a couple of hours, but we have to get to talking about rethinking happiness in life coaching and sort of turning around someone's mindset. Maybe before we jump into that, if we can talk about, maybe I'll let yourself introduce yourself and how you came to be into health coaching and helping people.
Sure, absolutely. It's a bit of a long story, but essentially, I think my first interest in coaching was when I was still living in Canada and I coached high school basketball. And that kind of coaching, obviously, very different than any kind of life or business or any type of coaching in the respect that that's more teaching and mentoring. But having an effect on young people, really, I had a couple of students that, would spend a little bit more time talking to me, and I had some influence on sort of how their school experience and so on and their mindset changed. And it was at a very early stage of my own personal development. So it was a very much we were teaching each other. I was teaching them through teaching myself, sort of thing. And then sort of over the course of my career, I would say I'd been in sales. I did sales coaching and sales training. And at some point, to become a better leader, manager in the corporate world, I took various different coaching courses until I finally decided, I really want to get certified. And I got my systemic coaching certification. And that really solidified for me that this was something that I really wanted to do. Just this being able to use a combination of my experience and the knowledge I've accumulated to help other people sort of change the way they see their situation, see the world, and help them to make better choices for themselves. Once I kind of got to that point, it just, there was no holding me back. I was lucky. Also, one of the trainers in my course, he really believed in me, and he had a coaching consulting business, and he brought me in, and I started doing leadership training and coaching executives, and that all kind of snowballed into where I am now.
Now you mentioned teaching, and maybe I'll throw a couple short stories in there. I was a physics college teacher for 7 years full time, and it's fascinating how physics, particularly first year university physics, is actually really, really, really easy. Probably the easiest university level course there is, mechanics anyway.
Okay.
But you have to have this realization that it's entirely cumulative. So if you have any gaps, it becomes impossible. Like any gaps at all, it becomes impossible. And you can say this to patients. You can say this to students, but if they hear, but it doesn't really sink in that they have to have sort of metacognition and think about whether they know or not, or whether they're just trying to follow patterns. Humans are great at just following patterns and just trying to go with the flow. He did something like that, so this question seems similar. I'll do something like that. So of course you get crazy answers. But when you have someone actually think about the steps and think about what the formulas mean and know what the formulas mean, I would often ask people who failed, do you know what the P in that formula stands for? I don't know. Well, how did you use it then if you don't even know what the formula is about?
Yeah.
And you'd have these students who would have these shifts. I remember one student who went from, I just have to get through this class, to I'm going to be a physicist.
Wow.
And another student who got the top grades on a test, who I said, okay, handing back the test. Oh, you got the top grade this time, 99%, great job. And he starts crying. He's like, you're joking, you're playing a trick on me. All I did was what makes sense. Yeah, you just did what made sense. It's very simple. As long as you don't have any gaps in your knowledge, Sadly, a lot of students don't know how to do fractions anymore, and so it becomes very difficult to follow what's going on the board if you don't know multiplication and fractions at university. But yeah, once they get that mind shift, it goes from being a dreaded course they just have to go through to being a joy and the most relaxing course there is. Because it's no longer impossible, it's no longer magic on the board. It's something they can deal with. It's something they can work through. They know how to approach the problem of physics, which is okay. I just have to make sure I know everything, and then as long as I stay on top of it, it's super easy. It's
Yeah,
that
it's
mind
amazing.
shift.
Yeah, I'm always like, we've got a 10-year-old here in the house, and I heard her say the other day, I'm just no good at math. And it's people, there's so many people who think they're not good at math or physics or these kind of things until you show them that actually it's just a process or formulas. It's, once you understand the sort of the key sort of basics of it, you can build on that. But I think that fixed mindset of thinking I'm not good at this, I really always encourage her to go, I'm not, and she's picked up on it now. I'm not good at it yet, and that
Yeah.
is a really big one. Because I had when I was coaching, I coached in a really not a great part of the city at the time, and so it was a high school where the kids had a rough background. So this one student, that he was living in a foster home, which was farther away from the high school than the other kids. So I would sometimes drive him because he lived close to me, and we'd have these long conversations. And the thing is, he came to the team late because he'd got his hand injured from a knife fight. Right, that this was the kind of environment. But then, he had another year of high school after I stopped coaching that team, and he called me up and he said, "Coach, I realize I'm not good enough to be, an athlete or a basketball player at a higher level, but I love sports." And so he got his grades up, and he had decided to study sports medicine.
Hmm.
And from a guy who was like, I had to go, if you don't get your grades up, I might not be able to let you play, to actually going to university and, doing sports medicine. What a huge shift. And, I take zero credit for that, but it's amazing to be able to see the shift in attitude when you start to realize some of your potential.
Hmm. Hmm. Maybe I'll go back to the coaching, because you said you're a certified coach, and there's all sorts of different coaching certifications around the world. There's
Mhm.
a pretty well-known one for health and wellness coaching. That's an expensive one to get. I looked into that one. But most life coaches are completely uncertified. Maybe they take a 10-hour Udemy online, like a $10 course, and they say, "Oh, look, I'm a certified life coach." Um, and like, what's your experience? Like, how, and particularly, how did you shift to life coaching, in particular? And maybe how did you decide to write a book, and pick the topics for your book?
Okay, well, I'll start with the coaching
Okay.
question, and you're right. I think there are a lot of people who call themselves coach, and really what they're doing is consulting. So they'll be a nutrition coach, but they've accumulated a certain amount of expertise and knowledge, and they can only basically coach you, in quotations there, in that field of nutrition. So I started taking smaller courses in NLP. I even did a course in cognitive behavioral therapy, because not because I
Hmm.
wanted to be a therapist, but the line of questioning, it fits really well for coaching. And then ultimately, I chose a systemic coaching certification because systemic coaching is a holistic approach. I'm not sure how familiar you are with systemic principles, but it's something where you take a holistic view and you recognize, you make distinctions between the different parts of the system and recognize the relationships between them. And it's all about changing perspectives, looking at things from different perspectives. And so through that approach, it really helps me to shift people's awareness away from being stuck in a problem to finding solutions. And it helps get away from this linear thinking of, this is the action, this is the result, sort of this linear cause and effect kind of way of thinking at things, but instead, because life is very complex,
Hmm.
for very complicated things, you take them apart and you have a reductionist approach. But for complex situations, like human interactions are very complex, that's when sort of a systemic approach is more beneficial. And so that's why I took that approach. And I work with people on a in life coaching on a private level, but I still coach people on an executive level in business as well. But I can, that's the beauty of this type of coaching, is you can apply it to any area of life. It's usually people looking to make some kind of change, some kind of shift, or to gain clarity on what they want in life. So that's what coaching is. I think I look at it as I accompany people on this journey of change that they're looking for.
Hmm.
And to your question about the writing the book, I've been writing a blog for over 10 years, and I think through that, and also through writing notes to myself, kind of in a Marcus Aurelius kind of way of writing these memoirs to or these kind of notes and things to remind yourself of your own philosophy. And so a lot of that, I really, in the same way that I like coaching young people, I wanted to sort of pass on my knowledge, but I also, the principle of the book, it takes a very coaching approach. So every chapter ends with every chapter but one ends with some questions, so that it gives you different perspectives on a topic, and then gives you some questions to reflect on that and find your own answers. Because at the end of the day, as a coach, I'm leading you to your own truth. And so the topic of happiness is a really important one to me, because I believe that happy people tend to be better neighbors, better partners, better citizens, because happy people, in my view, make better choices, less based on fear, on anger, and things that are more destructive. And so I think I have a vested interest in helping people find more happiness in their lives.
So you mentioned questions in your book, and I think that's a wonderful thing that I think it's important in any book that aims to make someone reflect. And reflection is an important part of learning, and to self-evaluate, to change mindset. You have to know where you are before you can go somewhere. It's very important in learning. Sadly, the world, particularly the online education sphere, it's all multiple choice. It's all because that's what's easy to grade. That's what a computer can grade, and people think of tests as something they have to get past, rather than something to help them learn. In fact, I made an ultrasound educational program recently, and I have essay type short answer questions, which aren't graded, this is purely for your learning. You should be able to answer these, and think hard on these, because if you're in a situation with a patient, you need to know these answers at a minimum, to be confident in working with a patient. Like you have has to be good. And then I have the separate set at the end, which is just multiple choice. That's just to prove you took the course. You can get your continuing education credits. It's a difference, so they label those in the educational world as a formative assessment rather than a summative. Formative helps your learning, whereas summative is to evaluate whether you've learned something or not. So I think that's great that your book contains some learning questions and some about some questions. I think that's good pedagogy.
Excellent. Yeah.
Your blog post. Now, I haven't read your book, but I've read at least a dozen of your blog posts, and I
Great.
really love how they're quite varied, and they cover all sorts of great topics. And I've interviewed a few other life coaches, and some of them talk about one of those topics or two of those topics, and you have page after page after page of topics, and each blog post is sort of, here's an idea, and it's like 200 words, 250 words, so you don't go, it's so if you're interested in learning or just seeing a whole bunch of different ideas, please check out his website. I'll have a link to it attached to the video or podcast. Because short idea, just a minute or two, you can read about where the idea is going, what's this idea about, What's so in addition to questions, is your book like that as well? Because I'm impressed with your
Uh,
blogs.
the book definitely it so it'll take each chapter is sort of an area that I think contributes to people's happiness in life. The book is one that encourages people to change their mindset, and do an audit, if you will, of their beliefs, and to recognize which beliefs are, because we can't, with our beliefs, it's not always easy to say, is this true or not? If you can see a belief's false, then by all means, look for something else. But for everything else, it's a matter of, is the belief supportive of my happiness and success in life? So I look at it in terms of utility. And so the book encourages people not to adopt my way of thinking or my philosophy. It's really about developing a philosophy that supports you in your happiness and success in life. And so that gives you your own roadmap. I read a coaching book years ago, basketball coaching book by a guy named Morgan Wooten, he was an icon in high school basketball in the U.S. And he starts the book by saying, in order to be a good coach, you need a coaching philosophy, because that gives you the roadmap to get you where you want to go. And I think the same is true for life. If you can create this philosophy that supports you, and I do this for myself when I'm in a challenging situation, I will ask myself, well, what does my philosophy say about this? Because sometimes it's not always top of mind, right? So it's good to take that time and reflect. And that's what I'm hoping for people to do, because if you're looking for change, one of my coaching mottos is awareness allows change. And we operate so much from this unconscious level, the not just the sort of things, the facts and figures or things that we can observe, but a lot of that stuff that's going on below the surface, our biases, our story, our emotions, and so on. And so bringing some of these things to the surface to help see what's dysfunctional about the way we're operating, I think is a really helpful thing. And that's what I am to do with the book and with my coaching.
So yes, so of course CBT is going to, not saying you took that's from CBT, because it's just a good idea, and you could argue CBT came out of psycho-cybernetics, 1960s, thoughts about the self-image, and you need to sort of think about your self-image and where you want your self-image to go, and you have your self-conscious help you. Of course, CBT is about evaluating your thoughts, feelings, and actions,
Yeah.
because you need to know where you are to know where you're going. I love that you said your book is more of a self roadmap, and it sounds, the way you describe it, as more of a guide. And of course, the book format allows you more of a guide instead of blog, 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 blog. Um,
Yeah, and because I don't believe in these rules to life, because again, rules are they're very specific, and it's great if you've created some rules for very specific areas of your life. But I believe in living on principles, and principles can be these guiding ideas for your life. And these aren't things that I can tell you. I can't tell you how to live a happy life. It's very individual, and the same goes for so many other things in life. And everyone's got their own path, their own talents, their own their own desires, and that's great that we have so much diversity in that respect. And so I don't want to be the guy that says this is how you have to do it, because I generally, when I coach people, I try to get them to avoid those I should and I must, I have to, because that's
yes.
education. Yeah, it's so common, especially in the German language too, but I hear it so much. People, oh, I have to do this or I should do that. And when I think, that reminds me of when I was a teenager rebelling against my parents, and what I had to do, it built so much emotional resistance to doing it. Whereas if you can talk about things in terms of I can, I want to, and I will, then you can, it's your own volition, it's your own desire to get it done. And I think that's far more empowering and motivating, looking at the world that way.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll talk about my own book, because I structured it in a similar way, in
Excellent.
that it's not this is the one trick, this in fact this it isn't, because that it isn't that way. So my book is pain is not a life sentence. And the truth of chronic pain is that people go to the surgeon, and the surgeon sees only one problem, and the only solution is surgery. Physiotherapists, same thing. This is this treatment I do with everyone. This is what they taught me at school. This is my, like everyone pigeonholes people from. You could have multiple overlapping problems that doctors they call it a satisfaction of search error. When okay, I found the one error, so that has to be the one thing that's wrong. When really the person has multiple overlapping issues, and so in order to manage your health, you have to become an expert in you and an expert of all of the possible things that could be wrong, because you almost can't trust the medical expert, sadly. And that's what my book is, sort of an educational book, so people can, it's sad to say, but sort of self-diagnose, or at least know that there's limitations in the healthcare field, so they can jump practitioner to practitioner until they can find one that can help them.
Yeah,
That's sort
and
of the way.
I imagine for a doctor, the diagnosis is your best estimate based on the symptoms, but you can't put yourself into the other
Hmm.
person's body, so it's
Exactly.
really difficult. And I think I take a similar approach in that pain and the sensations we have in our body are communication. It's telling us something's wrong or something's working well, and the same goes for the emotional system. So when we have emotional pain, it's also a sign that there's something to be addressed or something to look at or something that's in conflict with, maybe there's something in conflict with our values or our emotional needs and so on. And so when we can recognize that, it really helps us to Gesundheit. Really, when we can recognize that, it really helps be a better guide for ourselves. And that's why when I look at happiness, people often ask me, how do you define happiness? And I say, I look at happiness as this feedback that we get from life. So it's a feedback that tells us the actions we're taking and the choices we're making, or the way that we're looking at the world and perceiving the world. Is it in line with our values and our needs? So if some people become really unhappy because at the job they're doing, they're having to live in contrast with some of their deepest
Mm.
core values.
Hmm.
And then they think, well, I'm making great money, I don't know why I'm unhappy. And they haven't looked on that deeper level, because that's that feedback you're getting, that the way you feel is a good indication that it's time to look within and evaluate. And so that's what I encourage people to do. And that's how I look at happiness.
Uh, so many little tidbits all throughout this conversation. That's another great one. Yeah, people often say, even if they're unhappy, I've heard people say, "Well, I can't. I'll be happy in the future. Like I'll be happy once I achieve this thing." And you listen to them, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. Like,
The
uh,
if then,
yeah.
if I get a good relationship, or if I get the job that I want, or if I get the $1 million, or when I retire, like imagine waiting till then to be happy.
Hmm.
And it's not a destination, it's something.
Hmm.
There's happiness you can be found in every moment. And I think it's authentic happiness. It's not these sort of dopamine induced points, high points in your life, where those can be great too. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to disparage that, but I think that when I see so many people living for these moments, there's this great party, there's this great vacation that I've got planned, or there's this milestone that I've reached in life. They're there for a second, and they're on to the next thing, right? And then everything in between is like filler for them. And I think, wow, we only have we don't have that many of these peaks in our lives, and what's left? I mean, if you look at life only by those highlights, there's far more happy to be found, and you're clearly overlooking something if that's the way you're living, right?
So I have 2 points here. Lifestyle medicine is a medical specialty with a licensing board. It's starting to gain traction. It's I think 10 or 11 years old now. I joined because I want to help the movement. The yearly fees. But it's good because lifestyle plays a huge role. And lifestyle, they have 6 pillars of lifestyle. One of them is positive social connections, finding meaning in your life, being happy. Uh,
Mhm.
um, because these things should be part of a doctor's something a doctor asks, because statistically, we have great statistics on this. Whether, particularly later in life, people, retired people, whether you're happy, whether you have friends, whether you feel you have meaning in your life, changes how long you live by like 10 years.
Yeah.
It's more
And that's
important to ask those questions than blood pressure.
and I think they are. This is why I look at it systemically, because they interact on each other. I
Mm-hmm.
have a chapter in the book called Lifestyle, because it's not like I'm giving any medical or nutritional
Mm-hmm.
or anything advice like that, but I talk a little bit about what's worked for me and how I got there, so that people can look for ways in their own life to, whether it's improving their health or improving, the kind of environment they put themselves in, because all of those things contribute to your level of happiness. If you're struggling with your health, maybe someone who's a master of philosophy or Buddhism could be happy even if he was sick. But I think that certainly it makes it easier to live a happy life if you're healthy. If you definitely, you'll be happier if you keep yourself in motion, if you spend more time in nature. But also, food is. I hope you'll agree as a
Yeah,
doctor that
yeah,
food is medicine.
yeah.
Thinking about the things, having a philosophy about what you put into your body, and recognizing when your body's telling you it's not good for you. Because I was shocked when I found out things. When I lived in Canada, before I left, I sort of the pivotal moment in my life was discovering that what I was experiencing was depression, and I could go to therapy, and so I made some massive life changes. But a lot of that I attributed to the therapy and to the change of mindset. I still believe that my way of believing and thinking habitually are the biggest changes I made. But I found out after the fact that dehydration can lead to depression. Poor gut microbiome can contribute
Oh,
to
very, very, very
depression.
much so.
So that's why I say the systemic approach is so important, and you need to listen to your body. You need to look at all different elements, and they all contribute. And so if you're not finding the solution in one area, look at other contributing factors. It's not one thing's going to be the cure all. And we unfortunately live in a society that likes convenience and likes to take a
Mm-hmm.
pill, and that's going to solve all my
Mm-hmm.
problems.
Oh,
And certainly, if that's what you're looking for, you won't find it in my book, because life isn't that way.
maybe I'll add onto this because you mentioned so many great things. But sort of moving, get moving. Um, Doctors, chiropractors, physiotherapists can sometimes be the cause of people's chronic pain, because it influences basically people's ideas about pain in the body in a very negative way, and sends people down these negative spirals. And of course, depression and pain often go hand in hand.
Yes, I do.
You'd be surprised what your body is capable of. But oh no, I can't do that anymore. I can't. I can't
Yeah.
have fun. I can't play games. I can't. I'm always going to be in pain. How do you know? How can you see the future? But the doctor said, well, the doctor is stupid. um, so I'll use this opportunity to tell
Misinformed.
the audience some of the stupid things that doctors can say, and chiropractors and physiotherapists. Because, for example, let's say arthritis. So many people get diagnosed with arthritis. Arthritis is such, or disc degeneration in the spine, things like that. Even a disc herniation. These things are normal findings in people who are pain free. If you look at the statistics, I think for hips, I think 12% of people with hip pain have arthritis if we're talking about the 50 to 70 age range, and I think it's 9 or 10% for people who are pain free. So the percentage is almost the same. So maybe there's a slight association, but such a normal finding. How can you say so? Um, disc herniations often happen age 30 or younger, because the disc has a lot of fluid in it. But then actually, once you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, the disc has sort of dried out. So there's nothing to score. So the discs in our spine are basically ligaments going around a gel-filled or fluid-filled center, and it turns a compression force into a tensile force as the fluid tries to squirt outwards. Sort of smart. But after our 30s, like I guess humans aren't really designed to live very long. After our 30s, it sort of dries out. Now our back can still work fine. You can still have a pain-free back the rest of your life, but it dries out. So you can't have a painful disc herniation, past 40 because they're all dried out. You really can't have it. But if you had one in your 20s or 30s, it still appears as a disc herniation on MRI. So what they find is so about 1 in 3 people will have a disc herniation at one point in their life, typically early. But if you just take pain-free individuals, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you look at the disc herniations on MRI, what's the statistic? 1 out of 3 has a disc herniation. It all happened in their earlier years. But what does the doctor say? Oh, that's the cause of your pain. The radiologist saw a disc herniation, therefore that is your pain source. It's that one thing. When really it's a normal finding. And arthritis should just be called normal age-related bony changes. There's a slight association, but very, very poor association with pain. So many people have arthritis with no pain. Billions of people have arthritis with no pain. And so it's a poor sign of pain and moving. Often people are, oh yeah, things are grinding. Oh, so they have that image. Oh my God. Moving is causing damage. Their subconscious hears that. There's actually the neurology is actually quite fascinating. The subconscious is actually in charge of whether to ramp up pain or not, and it can actually recruit motion receptors, and can amplify pain from hearing something like that. And we have studies of, you explain how the neurology works, and people's pain goes down 30%. 30% on average for chronic pain patients. You just explain how pain works. The brain can ramp up pain if you think something's going to cause damage. If you have chronic issues, chances are moving is the path outwards. Getting your body moving is the path outwards. Relearning how to move. Often we have bad habits. Physiotherapists are prone to doing rigid exercises, and so people tend to plateau because maybe at the exercises, they're good at the exercises, but you don't do your exercises in life. You have all sorts of movements in life. And it's those other movements, the daily movements, that have to maybe be practiced and slowed down and seen. Actually, turns out I limp when I go upstairs. Oh, that's weird. And it's relearning like how to bend forward, or how to do stairs that can sometimes lead someone finally long-term out of the way of pain, but they're too scared to do stairs. They're too scared to exercise. Tendons get sickly and painful if they're not used.
Yeah.
The body's designed to be used, and it doesn't heal properly unless you're using it.
Yeah, I actually broke a bone in my hand, first bone break in my life, and that healed fairly quickly. That wasn't the problem, but I had a sort of a brace / cast on my hand for 5 weeks. And the worst part was after I got it off, trying to close my hand again, because, and I still am not, when I wake up in the morning, I still have some pain in it. And for something as small as breaking a bone in my pinky, to the pain that I still have partially, because I still play basketball even at my age. It's incredible that, because of lack of use for only 5 weeks, all of a sudden I'm in pain for months afterwards. But I have an interesting story about psychology and pain, because before I left Canada, I had chronic lower back pain. I went to a massage therapist. I went to chiropractor. Finally, I went to yoga, which helped, but probably more from a psychological aspect. But when I was involved in a family business, and I walked away, and I left Canada, and I went traveling through Asia, and I was carrying around 25 kilos on my back with a backpack. But I tell you, within 10 days of leaving Canada, my back pain I was pain free, even though I was carrying all this weight around, but I was in motion. I bought a good backpack, so my back was well supported. But psychologically, this is really not nothing against my family, but there were issues that I had that were unresolved, that kind of resolved after that point, and that was I've no scientific proof, but I would say I'm sure that some of the psychological issues and trauma that I hadn't resolved was contributed to my lower back pain. Would you agree with that?
Yep, yep, for sure. If you imagine your back as weak versus strong, or if you're very problem focus on another problem, not the back, but focus on something else, your brain will get rid of things that are hindering you, as in the back pain. There's all sorts of fascinating things I've done with patients. For example, men sometimes forget that lifting, like we like to lift weights, like we like to do things, and so sometimes you run into a 40, 50-year-old been stuck behind a desk forever, like all hunched. And I get them just to start shadow boxing, like, and they're like, oh, ow, 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 ow. And then I get them to start shadow boxing, and then like they start tentatively, and I'm like, come on, is that someone's coming after you? Go to come after your wife, and they're starting to get into it, throwing big full range punches, big hooks, and like look at yourself, look how like, oh yeah, look at me. Look what I can do. Of course, you have to get people to slowly recondition things. You can hurt yourself going straight into big boxing from not moving for 20 years. But yeah, the mindset can play just a huge role in pain, because pain is an emotion, and our brain can regulate it. Our subconscious regulates it quite heavily, and decides whether to create it or not, and how much to create. It's quite magical in that way.
That's great. Good to know. I'm going to check out your book, by the way.
Oh,
I've
thank you.
noted it down for myself. So it's a topic I'm super interested in anyway.
Maybe before we go, we've talked about you've left so many great tidbits throughout this presentation, this talk. Maybe some more actionable insights or practical strategies, maybe one or two for someone who's unhappy, maybe unhappy, doesn't know what to do, maybe feels they're stuck in their career. Maybe what would be something actionable for them, or
Yeah, well,
maybe even a question for them.
so it's a pretty broad question.
Yeah.
I think if you're unhappy, if you think you know the specific cause, then there's specific actions to take.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in general, when you sort of take stock of your life, and I use sometimes what's referred to as a wheel of life. It's kind of it gets you to rate different parts of your life, and then you can look at, well, if I change this one thing, how would it affect everything else? It's kind of a systemic approach. But again, going back to sort of my belief that your beliefs and your habitual way of thinking are the biggest contributor to, your unhappiness or your limitations in life, or you're not fulfilling your full potential. And so I look at three areas in terms of how beliefs develop, and I use those in order to help people then overcome their beliefs. So one would be, so your environment. If you're constantly if you're in a cultural situation that's difficult, it may be more difficult to change, but you can certainly change the amount of people you spend a lot of time with, hopefully, or you can change how much news that you watch, the kind of input that you're exposing yourself to. That will affect the kind of beliefs that you develop, or the kind of beliefs that you sustain. You can also when experience is another big contributor to what you believe. So you can have new experiences. Sometimes we look for the familiar, we stay in our comfort zone, and we get stuck there. But let's say you have a fear of public speaking, and that's something you want to overcome. But you're gripped by this fear. You start with speaking in front of a small group, and then a bigger group, and then you become proficient. So you change your experience. You have a new experience. And then with the repetitive thought, what I encourage people to do is I actually use affirmations, and people think they kind of laugh at that a little bit, but they work on me and they work on others. And the way I use affirmations is, if you have typical thoughts that you have about a certain subject, I create a statement that is the opposite of that, but it has to be believable to you, and it needs to be positive. and
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be said as if it was already true now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so if you keep telling yourself you're a millionaire but you're broke, that's not believable to you. And so when those negative thoughts come, I use my statement and I repeat it over and over again, and then the connections in your brain will then become weakened where that thought process is involved, and so that is a really powerful one. So I
Mm-hmm.
look at those three areas, and so finding the things you chronically think, creating a statement that's going to help you change that, and you'll find that it starts to fade. It starts to fade away, and it will come up less and less over time, and then you can replace it with new, more positive ways of thinking. So that's really, really good. I find having a morning or an evening ritual super important. Start your day with. For me, it's important to have some form of movement in the morning, and I meditate regularly. That helps regulate sort of and sets the tone for me for the day. Some people have more time to do that in the evening, and spend some time in nature. There was a study done just a few years ago in Leipzig, Germany, that showed that in areas with lots of green and park space and tree-lined streets had a far lower rate of prescription of antidepressants as those
Mm-hmm.
parts of the neighborhoods where there were just stone buildings and not a lot of nature. So that's correlative, but it still points to the direction of how important nature is for us. So I'm sorry, I've thrown a ton of stuff out there.
Yeah,
But
that is an amazing information-packed answer to a very vague and difficult to answer question from me. Great, impressive. I'll comment once on the affirmations, just to give people an example from my own life, because this is from psycho-cybernetics made me want to or basically made me make an affirmation for myself to repeat, and it's interesting, the subconscious. So for me, it was keeping a clean counter. I've always told myself, well, keeping a clean counter doesn't really matter. If I do it today, I'm going to have to do it tomorrow. I'm going to have to do it the other day. These were my thoughts. And so cleaning the counter just felt like such a waste of time. It felt draining. I was just like, oh, it's such a slog. I just really couldn't do it. I hated doing it. Every minute of doing it felt like an hour, or I'd get distracted and I'd end up doing something else and it wouldn't get done. Like, how do people do that? And I started with an affirmation. I'm someone who keeps a clean counter. I'm someone who keeps a clean counter. And it's so fascinating that eventually the counter stays clean on its own. It really stays, like, I don't notice it. Instead of putting the wrapper on the counter, it goes in the garbage. The bowl goes in the sink. If there's two things in the sink, it gets washed. And I do it without thinking now. My conscious mind doesn't even think about it, because I'm someone who keeps a clean counter. That's just who I am. That's what I told myself, and that's who I became, and it's no longer hard work. So it can definitely work for people. As you said, not everything works for everyone, but you give people these tools to try and to find their path to happiness, and it worked for me, for at least my counter anyway.
And I've it helps, and I've used it on myself. So like from cravings to changing habits to worrisome thoughts, I now repeat to myself regularly, everything always works out for me. And even when it's not working out now, the belief behind it is eventually it'll all work out. There's a lesson in this for me, or whatever. But it also reduces my stress. But I also, I live in Germany, where there's a bakery on every corner, and they're delicious. And I got into this habit of getting something sweet from my home office. It's just a short walk. And I found, wow, I'm starting to go there every day, right? And you start to develop these cravings, with sugar. It's addictive. Mm. And so I actually started telling myself, when I looked at it and I saw it triggered a desire to get that thing, I would say, I don't need that. And I would repeat that. Every time I looked at something like that, I would repeat, I don't need that. And it's amazing telling myself that again and again, how over time, like if you expect it to work instantly,
right,
it's about, you need to repeat it. But over time, I found it was really easy for me to say no, or sometimes I would order something without thinking. And now that doesn't happen anymore. If I want to make an exception, I'll do it consciously, but it won't be this automated response. And I think that's why it's all about what you internalize, right? These
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
beliefs that you internalize and these habits of thinking that you internalize. I think that is such a big part of changing the way you operate in life, and just like you did for yourself. And I think affirmations is a big part of that. So thanks for confirming.
So maybe I'll give you a chance for a last word for the audience. Any last
Yeah, I
message?
yeah, I think probably the biggest thing, and because had similar questions, I think just remember that don't believe everything that you think. We have, scientists say anywhere from 50 to 100,000 thoughts in a day, and most of them are nonsense, and shouldn't be believed. And so, remembering that it's not all true, and reflect and get some awareness about, or even ask yourself, is this true? And I think that'll help you get through the day a lot better,
Oh,
a
that's
lot happier.
a great message. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Uh,
for having me. It's been a pleasure.